right. Good morning, everybody. It is a beautiful day here in Highlands, and we are getting started with a live stream for our Garden in Every Season tour from May 4th. Speaking of which, may the 4th be with you. We're going to hang out for probably another minute just to see if anybody's going to join us, and then we'll get started. Your daily weather report, or I should say monthly weather report for Highlands here. It is absolutely gorgeous. We are having beautiful weather this past weekend. Today the clouds were flying by overhead, but everything is starting to become green, which is fantastic. Trees are leafing out, flowers are popping up. So we're going to highlight some of that this morning. If you spot some red over there by the back entrance of our nature center, that's some fire pink. If you spot some pink, that's pink shell azalea, and we're going to be talking about that in a moment. So the ferns are popping up, sky is blue, life is good. All right. So hello, if you're joining us. My name is Paige Engelbrechtson, and I am the Nature Center Education Specialist for the Highlands Biological Foundation. And we are here today on Monday, May 4th at the Highlands Biological Station, which was established in 1927. And we're going to be featuring the Botanical Garden in today's tour. Now, in the last month, a lot has changed here. I mean, just everything has gone green. In April, we talked mostly about the spring ephemerals because that was the biggest highlight of changes in the garden. This month, as I was starting to walk around and figure out what we could talk about, I realized there's so much happening and altering in the garden that it's not really fair to just do a short walk around and call that good. So instead, we're going to be starting every Monday for the month of April at 11:30. I'm going to be doing a live stream of a different portion of the botanical garden because there's just so much changing. I want you guys to get to experience it. Today, we're going to stick to this vicinity, the amphitheater, the meadow, if you guys have ever been there with the pavilion and picnic tables, and then the botanical garden entrance. And we're going to be talking about trees and shrubs because they are starting to pop off in terms of blooms. So if you have any questions or comments, please feel free to drop them in the chat and I will do my best to answer them. And if I don't know, I will do my best to look it up later and give you an answer. We're going to get started with perhaps one of the most iconic groups of shrubs that we have here in the area. Head on over this way. I bet you can spot it before we even get to it. So, anybody familiar with this particular plant? I'll give you a hint. Part of its name comes from its color. It just has a riot of blooms. You can see another one tucked back there. This is pink shell azalea, Rhododendron vasei. And it is one of the first azaleas that we have blooming here in the botanical garden. And just as you look across the forest in April, it's a delight to see these pops of color everywhere. You can see how it gets its name, pink shell azalea, but I mentioned it was a rhododendron, which might be a surprise if you're familiar with the area, because typically when people say rhododendron, we're talking about this kind of massive shrub. So as I look around the amphitheater here, most of the green that you're seeing is what we call rhododendron. We have 3 different major species here, and they're all fairly similar. They have these really dark, thick, leathery leaves. Rhododendron maximus, our great rhododendron, has the largest leaves. You can see how large they are. And they're evergreen. So even in the winter, if you look around this nature center, you'll see, or rest of Highlands, you'll see these beautiful rhododendrons hanging onto their color. So what's the story with the pink shell azalea? It doesn't have leaves, or at least it hasn't held onto them over the winter. You can see here, it's just starting to grow its new leaves back in. It's what we call deciduous. It loses its leaves every year and has to regrow them. And that's not what the rhododendrons we think of do. And in fact, that's the clue. When we talk about azaleas, we're talking about deciduous rhododendrons. So flame azalea, swamp azalea, pinkster azalea, they're all rhododendrons. They're all related to our great rhododendrons that are evergreen. They just lose their leaves in the winter. And they flower much earlier than our evergreen rhododendrons. If you've come up here in the summer for Memorial Day or 4th of July, you will have seen one of the 2 enormous waves of rhododendron flowerings that we have. 2 species will flower around Memorial Day, which is great for the holiday crowds, and then our 3rd will flower around 4th of July. So as you're driving, as opposed to the singular bops of color from individual azaleas, just picture flowers, much the same shape and style, but much larger, scattered across all those shrubs. It's like driving through a corridor of color. I hope you guys, has anybody here gotten a chance to experience that? It's absolutely gorgeous and one of the highlights of our summer. So we're gonna leave our azalea behind and head on over to talk about our first understory tree. Hello to those of you joining us. If you'd like, shout out where you're from in the chat. I hope you guys are up here in Highlands so you get a chance to experience this for yourself, but if not, that's why we're doing these live streams. All right, so we're coming up on the next plant we're going to talk about, a small tree. And I just spooked a robin who's now scolding me from inside of the tree. Sorry, friend. This is, any guesses? Hey, Georgia, you guys are probably warmer than we are here already. This is a dogwood. In fact, it is a flowering dogwood, and as soon as our robin friend takes off, I'll get a little closer. All right, there she goes. But I have a joke for you guys. How do you identify a dogwood? By its bark. It's terrible, but it's actually true. Dogwoods have this beautiful cracked bark that sometimes looks like it's splitting into small scales. And that's a pretty good identification characteristic. So in the winter, when it's lost its leaves, if you see these small, I think of them as hexagonal scales, that's a dogwood. And they are beautiful. You can see all of those flowers high up on the tree above where I can reach. So I have snagged one already to show you guys. This is the dogwood flower. Anybody know why it's important to North Carolina? Besides just being gorgeous? It is actually our state flower. And when you look at it, people tend to assume that this in its entirety is a flower. These are actually bracts. They're modified leaves. If we want to see the true flower, you have to look up close and very careful. And in fact, what we're seeing here are, in fact, most of the flowers are spent. They've lost their petals. There was one that had managed it, but I think in handling it, I've bumped the petals off. Oh, right here. Right above my thumb, you can see these teeny tiny 4 little petals popping out. And that's a singular flower. So this whole head is made up of them. And they're gorgeous. In the fall, the fruits will be these shiny red berries that are actually a really important food source for a lot of animals that stay here during the winter. And white is actually a very common color for our flowering trees here right now. Which means when you're driving down the road and you're trying to identify trees as you're driving, which I don't recommend because I guess that counts as a distracted driving, there is one quick tip to tell the different trees apart. Ignoring height, ignoring the leaves, just at a glance as you're driving. If you see those beautiful white flowers scattered like snow on top of the branches, I know that's a dogwood. There's another tree with white blooms right over here that's very similar. Let me zoom in. Any guesses? And I apologize for my hands shaking. This is a Carolina silver bell. Let me see if I can zoom out again. All right, still working on it. And I have here actually an example flower to show you what it looks like when it's much closer and not high up on a tree. Compared to the dogwoods, these guys hang underneath the tree in little groups. So they're not sitting on top and they're not large. They're actually fairly small and hanging down beautifully. I've often heard them suggested as a substitute for Bradford pears, which are not native, and Carolina silver bells are. So we're going to keep going. Apologize, it doesn't seem to want to zoom out, so I guess we're working with what we got. So we're heading past our plants of the Cherokee garden here. And we're heading down by our biodiversity building. That's a little less jittery. So, it might look like just a wall of green in front of us. But there's actually a really cool shrub that's making up most of what we see. And it's this guy right here. Any guesses? This one has an unusual name. We call it buffalo nut. When asked how exactly it got that name, I've heard a number of different stories, but the one that makes the most sense, as far as it makes sense, is that when settlers were first moving out here into the mountains, into Buffalo Nut Range, there were still bison found this far east, and that they observed bison and elk eating the fruits in the winter, which are small, round, brown nuts. Which is an interesting idea because there's a toxic oil that's found in high concentration in the fruits. So if the bison and elk were in fact eating it, then they appear to not suffer the detrimental effects that we do if we were to eat it. And there are two really cool facts about this shrub. The first is that it has male and female flowers. So the female flowers are these very small spikes with just a few ones. And the male flowers are found on these much larger spikes. And in fact, you can see those teeny tiny white petals inside of the green shell. Each of these is a flower. And the second cool fact about this shrub is what it does to get its food. So typically when we look at a plant and it has green leaves, what do we think it does to make energy? Photosynthesizes. But while the buffalo nut does photosynthesize to some extent, its true source of power, so to speak, comes from deep underground, its root system. If we were to follow the root system of this buffalo nut down across the ground, we could find that its roots stretch as far as 40 feet away, and it will be connected to one of these trees. It's parasitizing the tree and taking nutrients and water from its host. And it's not very particular. It's in the sandalwood family, which means it's related distantly to mistletoe. And some species of mistletoe will only grow on certain species of oaks, for example. They're very particular. These guys have been known to parasitize over 60 species of other plants. So they really are indiscriminate parasitizers. And judging by the number of them that are back here, they're doing pretty well. What that means for the host trees, I can't say. We're going to keep moving on. And if you guys have any questions or comments, please throw them in the chat. I will do my best to answer them. So over to our left, we have our moss garden, but we're actually going to bypass this to come walk past our cottages. So there are 3 really interesting species here. So over here, with these beautiful pinky purple flowers that are just starting to come out. Any guesses as to what kind of plant this is? This is an azalea. You can see the same kind of flower structure as we saw on our pink shell azalea. And it is deciduous. It lost its leaves and now it's growing them back. This is a pinkster azalea, rhododendron paraclimenoides. Please forgive my Latin. I took it, but you would never know. And pinkster comes from the Dutch word for 7 Sundays after Easter, rather, which is said to be when this blooms. We're a little early, but most of the shrub still hasn't bloomed. And over here, any guesses as to what this is? And what the bumblebees are absolutely loving? This is a Carolina rhododendron, or rhododendron minus. So it has leathery leaves, although these are much smaller than the great rhododendron we saw earlier. And you can see how they share the flower type with the azaleas because they're in the same genus. It's just whether or not they hang on to their leaves. These guys bloom a little bit earlier than the 3 most common species of rhododendron that we have up here. So it's putting on a good show for you now. And the bees. And then the last one over here, any guesses? Soft green leaves. This is a swamp azalea, Rhododendron viscosum. It's grown its leaves, but you can see it has yet to have its flowers bloom. They'll come out of this flower bud here. So, it's amazing. These things have all started really taking off in the last few weeks. So we're going to circle by our garden entrance here and talk for a moment about this tree in the center of the frame. Anybody recognize it? Big green leaves are a dead giveaway for me, along with the thick stems that they're on. This is a magnolia, an umbrella magnolia to be exact, but those of you who are familiar only with coastal magnolias may be surprised that this is a deciduous plant. These leaves are soft and they fall off and they're not thick and leathery like coastal magnolias typically are. We have 4 species here in the garden. We have umbrella magnolia, which this one is said to resemble an umbrella over your head. Big leaf magnolia, and I bet you can guess where that gets its name. And then cucumber and Fraser magnolias. And these guys are also blooming, although it's very high up, so I couldn't snag one for you guys to see up close. But what'll happen is this beautiful bud here in the middle will pop and it'll release these beautiful white petals that'll sit upright on top of the magnolia and attract a very unique pollinator with its pretty nasty scent. In fact, a pollinator that it shares with our last featured plant today. And we'll find out a little bit more about that in a moment. But I wanted to show you guys this. Any ideas about how this is related to our cucumber magnolia or our umbrella magnolia? Give you a hint. After the flower vanishes a few months later, this pops up. And when it does, it's really fleshy and it's bright red, which makes it really attractive for birds. So they'll come down, they'll pluck out the flesh and the seeds that would be in each of these pockets and fly off, dispersing them as they go. So this is apparently how the cucumber magnolia got its name, when bright red fleshy object like this resembles a cucumber, I suppose. But see how large those leaves are. Big leaf magnolia in our garden often has leaves that are longer than my entire forearm, so it's well named. Life is good here in the botanical garden. We'll be exploring other parts of the botanical garden again every Monday for the rest of the month at 11:30. I'll do a short live stream, or if it's a spotty service, maybe a video. But the last one that we're going to touch on today is this plant right here. And these red flowers are really distinctive. This is called Carolina sweet shrub. So called because of its beautiful fragrance. Pretty much every part of the plant is fragrant, but the flowers are the most so. And what it smells like depends on who you ask. I have heard people say that it smells like a strawberry banana mix. What I think it smells like is fermenting apples, which can be a good smell in certain circumstances, or with the strength of the smell. Different plants actually have different levels of scent, so to speak. And that fermenting scent is something that it shares with the cucumber magnolia that we were just talking about. And that's specific to one particular group of pollinators. If you can guess, like, major kudos to you, because I actually didn't know until starting to research this, that fermenting smell is really attractive to beetles. So the magnolias and our sweet shrubs and other flowers that have that kind of fermenting smell, are most attractive to beetles as pollinators. And with our Carolina sweet shrubs, what's interesting is when the flowers are still closed, the beetles will crawl inside and then get stuck. And they'll be trapped there because of the way the flower is formed until it matures enough to shower them in pollen. And then it will open up, allowing them to escape, where hopefully for the Carolina sweet shrub, they'll move on to another flower and repeat the same process, delivering their pollen. And you would think if this was an unpleasant experience that the beetles would do this once and then learn, but they actually are fed by the plant. The plant produces beetle bites, essentially, little bits of nutrients that the beetles can eat, that they eat while in their own form of quarantine. So it must be successful because Carolina sweet shrub is everywhere. And if you have a chance, stop and take a smell and see what it sounds like to you. So that is, hello folks, welcome to the Botanical Garden. Doing all right, doing all right. Enjoy your walk.
Thank you. Enjoy your day.
Thank you. So for the last bit, we're gonna head up to our Woodland Way. Hello, welcome. This is the area that we walked through last month. And if you go back and take a look and then watch what we're seeing here, you'll notice a striking difference in just how green everything is. And if you see any flowers you want to know a little bit more about, drop it in the chat. But I really, the birds are having their say about me walking through. We have some cutleaf twoswort, foam flower. The bluebells have gone absolutely mad. The ferns are delighting in all this sun. Now we have more trillium popping up over here in our trillium patch with their distinctive 3-leaf structure. The stonecrop is also enjoying life. And it's just absolutely vibrant with color and flowers. So it's amazing the difference that a single month can make. Bellwort, golden seal. We're starting to get a little bit more shady as the trees above us leaf out, which is going to be important for those spring ephemerals. That's going to be their cue that time's up, but I'm enjoying it immensely. Right. Hello to you all as well. I hope you guys are doing well. And the last thing that I wanted to highlight for you guys is this flower that's featured on our butterfly silhouette. It's this flower. And hopefully by now you can recognize it's an azalea. This is called a flame azalea. William Bartram, who wandered through this area and wrote extensively about his travels, has a part where he talks about seeing flame azaleas scattered across the hillside, and that after coming out of a dark rhododendron tunnel, much like we just did, you think for a moment that the mountains are on fire. And they really are. They are on fire with color and life and just blue skies at the moment. So that is going to be our tour for today. Heading up the main points. Check out our Facebook page later this evening for our first Yoga in the Garden video. Just showing you guys around the amphitheater again. In partnership with Yoga Highlands. And next month for our first Monday tour, I'm hoping that all these rhododendrons we're looking at now will also be in bloom. So, very much so. It is a beautiful day indeed. Thank you guys for joining me. I hope that you guys are all safe and well. And thank you so much for watching. If you have any questions, even after the fact, if you're watching this not on Monday, May the 4th, drop them in the chat or in the comments and we'll do our best to get back to you. But thank you and have a good day. Bye.